When the perfidious Soviet Union collapsed under the stresses of German invasion and the inherent weakness of the communist system, the Russian Fascist Party and her Japanese benefactors, long in exile in the Manchurian city of Harbin, were afforded an opportunity to take back Russia. Konstantin Vozhd of all Russian government took it upon himself to begin reclamation efforts in an attempt to seize Russia and save her from the depravities of Bolshevism. Plunging into the Far East, the RFP and her allies in the old white movement made it as far as the city of Chita before their offensive was stunted. As the advance slowed, cracks began to show between the Tsarists and the fascists, and soon the whites under Ataman Semyonov seized the city of Chita and officially distanced themselves from the party. If the Vozhd was surprised at the turn of events, he was enraged when former party member Mikhail split the party and set up a rival government in the remote port of Magadan, posing a threat to the legitimacy and rule. Since then, based in the small town of Zaya, the Vozhd had become dejected, increasingly paranoid. His closest advisors, Gregory Shirokov and Alexander Bolotovo, the head of the party's paramilitary blackshirts and the security minister, respectively, have indulged his paranoia, bringing the Vozhd's lists of internal party members who are dissenters and troublesome figures within the regime. The Vozhd plans of creating a strong Russia based in National Socialism, where the Vozhd is paramount and a system derived from the Germans and law. However, to do this, he will need to cleanse the party of the people responsible for his failures. The Vozhd's immediate internal and external threats need to be dealt with before he can focus on ending the Bolshevik remnants to the west. To the north, Mikhail, so-called Free State of Magadan, taunts the Vozhd's every waking hour, while the west, based in Chita, the farcical Transbaikal Principality represents the remnants of the traitorous whites. Both will need to be dealt with their leadership annihilated before the Vozhd and his party can focus on the true threat in the Far East. Grah's Yagodos, Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, and their anarchist mutineers, based in Buryatia, none shall stand in Konstantin Rodazovsky's path for God, nation, and labor. So he's a bit of a fascist, I guess. He's always a man of the East. For most people in Amur, being in an RFP interrogation facility would be a surefire death sentence. For Lev Okhutin, secretary of the RFP and right-hand man of the Vozhd, it was another day of the week. Screams rang out in a dimly lit facility which Okhutin was touring as part of his official duties. But for a place like this, you learn to make the cries for help into a background noise. All of Amur had just once he glanced into a chamber. Sorry, my cat got on my keyboard. So all Amur had got used to the noises. Just once he glanced into a chamber and saw a broken man pleading in a hoarse voice for help. Without a second thought, Okhutin turned away and left him to his fate. Whatever the man had been through, he undoubtedly deserved it. After all, the Vozhd willed it. Okhutin knew there was a great moral good to aiding Rodazovsky's cause in spite of the seemingly gruesome nature of it, such as crushing the Bolsheviks that had driven them all out of their home, and the Jews that had guided the disastrous revolution. In any case, he knew that Rodovalsky's was doing the right thing, because he placed trust in the Vhod, just as he trusted him. That was the foundation of their friendship, a bond forged through a mutual hatred of the subhumans during the days in Harbin, and strong enough to resist any attempt by lesser men to poison it. Although Okitin thought as yet another pain scream filled the air, the last part might not be so true anymore. With what Bolotovo was capable and of willing to do, he feared the day his own name would be included among these, the tortured whispers to Rodovalsky, feeding the paranoia of the Vod that Okitin believed in even now. The belief is all he really had. Basically, he just does not want to fuck around and find out. A cold eastern wind rattled through the shutters of the Vod office window, whistling as it slipped between the thin wooden slats. Rodovalsky shivered and drew the heavy greatcoat closer around his shoulders, closing the fur lining around his neck to try to keep the warmth in. Only his face and hands were exposed to the chilly air of his makeshift headquarters, intense eyes tracing across the page before him as his numb fingers scrawled out a new addition to his manifesto of Russian National Socialism. The ancient clock on the wall chimed a single peal, signifying that 1 o'clock in the morning had come. As he reached the bottom of the page and downed his pen, it was the third night in a row Rodovalsky had stayed up late to continue work on his magnum opus. He had thought it complete long ago, but the sudden collapse of Red authority and the mockery of Russia it maintained had changed the situation. Without the aid of the Japanese, he had gone from Harbin to distant Zaya on the river Amur in just a few short days. In a short period of time, just a few years prior, the fortunes of Russian Fascist Party had changed completely. That hadn't lasted long, of course. The thought of Motovolsky betrayal and split of the RFP stoked the fire and hate in the Vozhod's gut, and he reached for the flask of vodka beside him to quench it. The taste vile and stomach-churning as the betrayal did little to soothe his temper, but he ignored it and took another deep swig. It would do its job eventually, and that it was just like the assorted rabble that his statelet called an army, crude, ill-formed, hammered out of whatever was lying around to make something functional. But it was his, it was Russia's, for only here was Russia to be found. Beyond Amur's borders, there lay only traitors, subhumans, and Reds, their collective boot on his throat of the Russian people. Oh, on the throat of the Russian people. Someday he would have his chance. Someday, as the vodka saw him through, one hard day after another, the RFP would see Russia through this trial. Someday. So these are the guys that broke off with me. And then, yeah. This is just him, like, reminiscing on his older days when the Fascist Party was stronger. And, he was gonna chase out the Jews and the Reds out of Russia. He needed to focus a little more on his magnum opus. So this was just him asking Manchukuo in Japan if he could have a little tiny place around here that was the birthplace of the Russian Fascist Party. And this is the Determined, because I've finished Contact the Japanese. Grigory Shirov checked the time on his watch, 8:45 in the morning, time enough for the leader of the Black Shirts, the Russian Fascist Party paramilitary wing, to make his way to the party headquarters for his meetings. Sitting at his desk, he pulled out 2 small leather-bound books, one black and one brown. Opening the cracked spine of the black book, he looked at his appointments for the day to be sure that he wouldn't miss any. As he looked well into the afternoon, he grimaced. A conference with the security minister, Alexander, and the Vozd himself, the Vozd he could handle despite his leader's seemingly ever-increasing paranoia. It was Bolotov that he couldn't stomach. With their lunge into Russia proper, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the RFP had a shot at forming legitimate state, to abandon the thuggery and mafia-like tactics which had defined their stay in the city of Harbin. It wasn't the violence Sherikrov disliked, it was the seemingly mindless character that was associated with Bolotov's unique brand, as if he and those in his employ were rabid dogs. Bolotov apparently had no intention to ever depart from his ways, despite Sherikov's continued urgings. If Sherikrov wasn't integral and such a good friend of the Vozd, he was sure that he would have been shot by the morphine addicts long ago. Closing the black book and opening the brown, he looked through his journal, meticulously kept ever since the early days of his involvement with the party. He remembered his failed career as a teacher, and a tinge of yearning for the days of Harbin. Looking at the faded pages, the leader of the black shirts resolved that he would serve faithfully in his post, both officially in the black shirts and unofficially as a force for civilizing the party that he loved, humanizing the Vozd. Why? Hey, Japan, accept the offer for us to take that little place right here. Let's go. And we get a core on it, and it changes the name. Of fascists and kittens. Go on, Ravansky said to the tiny figure of a kitten before him. Drink. In front of it was a bowl filled with warm milk. As his fingers touched its head, it hissed. Fierce kitten. When Ravansky found him on the street of his new domain, it scratched his face. No doubt, no man would dare mess with the little kitten, he thought. Brave and courageous in the face of absolute danger. Its coat was a patchy and rough crisscross of monochrome, but its eyes were bright golden discs, God's gift to the Vods of Russians. An aide entered. Ravansky did not even notice the footsteps. Russia could wait. The world could wait. The Jews could wait. The party, Motovatsky, Mikhail, none of it mattered. The kitten's hisses and snorts mattered more than the aide's report. It's cute. Its tongue lapping the white richness in front of it soothed Carton's heart more than anything else. The feel of its fur, coarse and dirty, dusty and grimy coat, did not repulse it nor frighten him. At his touch was a new life, unsullied and unsoiled by the machinations of the world hostile to his ideals. Sir, the aide said, "Are you quite all right?" "Yes, moreover. What are you doing here? Get out of here," Rodonsky thought. He was in no mood to send anyone to the firing line. Nice kitty, sir. No shit. Have you ever thought a name for it yet, sir? The question troubled Rodonsky. He had not given a thought. What would be a good name for a bold kitten such as this one? Mura. He's Mura now. Get out. The aide promptly exited the room and left Ravansky alone with his new friend, his companion through the decades to come. Even the Vod has a heart. That's kind of cute. The enemy, citizens of all Russia, by decree of the Vod, the following groups are hereby declared outlaws, traitors, and enemies of the state. The Jewry, all Jews, whatever they might hide, are the mortal foes of God's people, and the antithesis of our pure Russian culture. They are the greatest enemy that the civilized world has ever faced. If they feign the appearance of weakness, be not fooled by their numbers or blood or appearance, for they will seize the opportunity to grow fat upon the blood of yourself and your family. When you find a Jew, you must not hesitate, be it man, woman, or merely mewling spawn. Act swiftly and without mercy. If you are outnumbered, report to the local RFP with militia, for the Jews possess a low cunning that makes them dangerous in numbers. Bolsheviks, a vile mixture of Jews and their groveling servants. The Bolsheviks were the means by which the elders of Zion laid low Holy Russia. Bolsheviks are easily recognized, even when distinguished, thanks to their tendencies toward distinctly Jewish behavior. They are mad ideologues who will not hesitate to commit acts of theft and murder to further the aims of the masters. However, deception is second nature to them, and they will go to any lengths to obfuscate their true identities. If you suspect someone to be a Bolshevik, or influenced by Bolshevism, report them immediately to your nearest Russian fascist party representative. The Freemasons, the most cunning and subtle of our foes. The Freemasons are agents of Judo-Bolshevism who infest the circles of wealth and power. Any man of substantial means or intellect who has not sworn absolute loyalty to the Vozd is a possible Freemason or agent thereof, and should be subjected to intense scrutiny at all times. Should a friend, relative, or acquaintance begin to accumulate wealth without sufficient explanation, or a woman show interest in intellectual matters, inform a Russian fascist party representative. What? So even women can't? That's so stupid. These guys are schizo. The Purge of the Supreme Council. The Supreme Council met once a day, usually in the morning, 7 days a week, in the capital of the all-Russian government. The building they met in is a converted hotel. It was made to look much grander than it really was, a giant glowing swastika, akin to the one that Rodovsky had installed in the RFP building in Mazzoli decades ago, had been placed on top of the old hotel. Ostensibly, the Supreme Council was a body of government that would determine laws, enforce ordinances, and help guide the Vozd in his quest to reunite Russia. However, to any independent observer, it would seem closer to the king and his court than a council of equals. Truthfully, the Supreme Council wielded little power. Most members were the oldest thugs from the RFP back when it was an exiled government in Harbin, and for the most part, none of them were dared to challenge the policies of the Vozd, especially in his current volatile moods. Thus, the Supreme Council was more of Ravensky's echo chamber than an actual functioning arm of the government. That being said, it didn't prevent the paranoid Vozd from thinking that there were dissenters even among his oldest and most trusted advisors. So when the council met this morning, Ravadonsky, Bolotov, and Okitin stood at the end of the conference room and watched as one in every 3 council members were forced out of their seats by black shirts and arrested for anti-Russian activities. In the coming days, all of those arrested would be publicly trialed and hung, their names stricken from the party registry and their memory buried. Finally, Ravonsky would mention to Bolotov, "We've secured the highest echelons of our party's leadership." The security minister tactically agreed. "Of course, my Vozd. They were plotting. I'm glad we were rid of them." Even Bolotov had begun to doubt the extent of his purchase. How long before Vysotsky turned on him? The dissenters won't liquidate themselves. This is basically just saying that they set up a more intricate spy network, and they're not letting any traitors spared. Hail to the Vozd. After the purge of the Supreme Council, the Vozd had vested interest in ensuring that the governing body of his all-Russian state was backed up to full strength. A series of names were put forward by both the remaining members of the Supreme Council as well as Bolotov himself, each of them vetted carefully for potential loyalty issues as well as examinations of their past actions as members of the Russian Fascist Party. Name by name was eliminated from the list. Andreev had a history of minor insubordination. Viktorov had too many friends in low places, and Isiev just wasn't really liked by the rest of the council. These were just a few examples. Eventually, however, a series of names were chosen. Loyal, skilled, and fanatical were the trio of traits that the decision was ultimately based upon. The new Supreme Council was between the survivors of the purge and the new members had become incredibly loyal institution to Ravadonsky. In reality, little more than an echo chamber for his thoughts and direction. Repeat after me. I believe in the one God. I promised to serve the one true Vozd. I will do so with loyalty and with complete faith and confidence in his decisions and beliefs. I believe in the Russian Fascist Party and its ability to reunite all of Russians under one banner for God, nation, and labor. The ceremony for swearing in the Supreme Council was unannounced to the public and remained austere occasion, undertaken in the early morning. He gave them tricolored sash of black, gold, and white, adorned with a single iron swastika short skirt, welcome and congratulations were given by the Vazd before instructing them where they needed to go. Okay, especially show that loyalty is secured and that he's more happy with it. A holy mission. As the gospel reading ended, the Patriarch of Russia stepped towards to take the deacon's place before his flock. The once modest church in Zaya had been decorated from floor to rafters with gold and icons taken from Harbin. A great mass of black-shirt soldiers and regular citizens packed the floor, pressed into every corner like sardines. Those outside crowded around half-open doors, eager to hear the hierarch's first homily. Brothers and sisters in Christ, he began, his voice filled with the stern strength of a seasoned preacher. We live in the darkest days. The Lord looks down upon our holy land and surely weeps. Where once there stood a nation of wise priests, humble peasants, and pious soldiers, there is now little more than ash and ruin. His chosen people have been ravaged by war, famine, pestilence, and strife. We all seek answers to soothe our souls, the greatest of which must be, whom do we hold responsible? Who has brought the ruinations of Satan to holy Russia? The church was silent for a moment, save for the soft whistling of wind through blue shingles. The sons of Cain. The patriarch suddenly bellowed, his audience thoroughly enraptured. The murderers of Christ, who have survived in the home of the faithful for generations as rats in the walls. The disciples of Judas, who multiply with every passing year, sup on the blood of the Lord's children and make gruesome feasts of holy Russia. Who shall deliver us from these parasites, my flock? Who will bear the torch of the true faith and wield the scourge of Christ to drive out the Jew? The patriarch raised his arm to the heavens, the sweat of adulation dripping into his ashen beard. The Vaz, my children, his name is unspoken, prophecy fulfilled. Constantine reborn, come to deliver holy Russia unto salvation. His will and vision, bestowed by the Holy Spirit, will illuminate the path for our brave Christian soldiers as they sweep farcical Bolshevism and liberate our earthly paradise from the minions of the great deceiver. Soon the Lord will smile upon us once more, and all creation will know Christ's truth of National Socialism. Let's get them with the doors. Negro. El Negro. I know Loon's playing Risk of Rain. With movies, are they good? Yeah. The Russian Fascist Party's capital, Zaya, had long been the hub for the Vaz's fervent purges, from top to bottom, of both party and the wider urban society as a whole. For weeks, the city had been bustling. Not only were people going about their standard lives, but they had also attended shows, trials, watched the executions of traitors, and snitched on their neighbors and loved ones. The past few weeks had been hard on everybody, and the fanatical pace at which both the purges and the subsequent executions had taken clearly had inflicted a collective toll on the capital's population. No more evident in this fact than the Konstantin Fedorov, a minor party official that had only narrowly escaped persecution himself by turning in his brother Alexei for anti-Russian activities. Fedorov had been working late shifts to process extra paperwork, effectively pushing pencils for higher-ups who couldn't even be bothered. It was often said that Russian Fascist Party was a living, breathing thing, and people like Fedorov were what keep it alive. Regardless, Fedorov had some skill with betrayal, and a lot of luck. Avoided the purges, and he wasn't exactly sure how he did it, nor how he felt about it. Basically just saying, like, the nightmare finally over, the purges and all that. You just have to escape them. The traitor's lot. There's nothing worse than betrayal. I'd rather consider my own death than betrayal, but yet that's what I've been dealt, and as such I must react accordingly. I hereby condemn you, Mikhail Alexeyevich Motovsky, the worst of the betrayers, the renegade in Magadan, to death. Ever since the collapse of the Madovsky regime and his subsequent capture by Ravdansky's loyalists, the renegade has remained nearly completely silent throughout his imprisonment and torture. He would not even admit his crimes, splitting the party, anti-Russian activities, preaching the morality and decency, either under duress or on the stand. It's clear that he's guilty, of course, but he isn't playing into the show that Ravdansky had hoped he would put on. Regardless, the execution would go onward. It had to. The central square of Zaya, once the market, had since been transformed into the town's gallows for all of Zavald's ideological enemies, had been packed with a number of black shirts and senior members of the RFP. Each picked himself to the execution, had been responsible for their hardships. Once he had brought up Ravensky himself, was waiting there to greet him, looking him directly in the eye. The Vozd asked him, "Any last words?" Silence followed, as Madovsky scared back. Awkward sounds passing by, frustrated by his silence. Ravdansky threw a punch, landing on his captive's cheek. He spat a single word to Madovsky, "Bastard." Turning to the executioner, he gave him the official command. Thus ended this split. Bam. It was late. How late? He wasn't sure. All he knew that his security ministers, Bolotov, and a pair of Supreme Council members had insisted on meeting him to brief him on the status of the party's reputation in Chita, the city newly liberated from the monarchists. But his head wasn't in the right place to receive such news they were offering. Eyes normally looking at reports but glazed over, the Vod politely listened to the group before dismissing them. Once he was sure that they had finished, as they filed out the room, Ravdansky turned his attention to what was on his mind, the past decade of his life, from a fiery, preacher-esque figure in Harbin to the warlord of a pseudo-statelet in the Amur region. And finally, his triumph over his enemies in the reunification of the Russian Fascist Party. But he remembered too quite well a time when his enemies were not enemies at all. In fact, he had even called some of them friends. The atmosphere of Harbin and the scarcity of resources in their struggle made cooperation between the whites and the fascists, both pragmatic and fanatically ideological, absolutely necessary. There were always arguments, but were both on good terms, good times and bad, sharing dinner and vodka with Ataman Semyonov, for example, or drunkenly belting out White Army songs with Matkovsky from his balcony into the chilly Manchurian night. Radovansky remembered it only for a brief minute, that his friends turned enemies were more than just targets. They were humans, after all. The work that the Vozd went through, all the painstaking measures to dehumanize his enemies. He couldn't shake the fact that they were all, after all, people. People with some of whom he had once shared real connections with. He sighed and glanced at the report to the left of his desk by Bolotov. Humans, maybe, Radovansky thought, but still traitors. And the Vozd, with strong mental push, dismissed his thoughts and reminiscences, and picked up the report. He read it, every word, in fact, and found it satisfying. Look how far we've come, he muttered himself, reminiscing on the past, quickly transitioned into preparing for the future, pondering his next move, another sleepless night. So I cleared out Eastern Siberia, and I killed the crowd which had been assembled to witness the execution of Alexander Men was uncomfortably silent. Nobody said a word or threw anything as they parted to let the black shirts through. The priestly prisoner in tow, Min, was haggard, starving, broken, but unbowed. He continued to quietly pray through the bloodied lips, pacing along as calmly as a monk going about his cloistered life. Only at the far fringes of the crowd were voices heard, voices that whispered of the northern priests who had taken on a reputation that far eclipsed his humble form. Some spoke of him, his plain appearance, other of his supposed sorcerous powers. All were tinged by a fear of what might come of the consequences of his demise. Even the patriarch, a vowed follower of the church, and the Vozd conducted the last rites with trembling hands. The black shirts standing alongside the condemned glanced around nervously, tapped their feet, wishing only for the senses of discomfort, of wrongness to end. Men's quiet prayers wormed their way into the ears of those around him. There were no acknowledgments of the noose being fastened around his neck. The lever clunked, men's bodies dropped, ending his prayer instantly. With a near inaudible crunch, Bolotov, who had pacifically tied the noose to strangle the priest to death, instead turned white as snow as he realized what had happened. They all knew the truth in the depth of their soul. A terrible thing had been done, but none would ever speak of it again. The citizens present that day would forever live in silent fear of the judgment that now surely awaited them. Man is unjust, but God is just, and finally justice triumphs. Zaya, Chita, Magadan, Irkutsk. The swastika flies over every corner of eastern Siberia. The streets are quiet and orderly, save for the roving gangs of black shirts who continue to drag enemies of the state from their homes and set them dangling from the gallows. The strong rule, and the weak suffer what they must, toiling for their betters in the mines and concentration camps. Dozens die every day, crushed beneath a Russian jackboot. Finally, as it should be in our reborn Russia, there remains much to do before we turn our gaze westward and begin liberation of all of Russia. With our immediate threats disposed of and the RFP secured, the Vozd now has the opportunity to carry out his planned reorganization of the nation. We still want to carry for many things necessary for victory: proper industry, modern agriculture, and large-scale armament production, just to name a few. But no minor setbacks can stop us from fulfilling our duty, our destiny. We have risen from our Siberian backwater to claim the entirety of the Far East. Our enemies lie broken, burned, and buried. Every foe we faced has been shattered by the iron fist of National Socialism. The same will be true for any other Jewish puppet who dares stand before us. The skies darken not with gloom of defeat, but defeat and destruction, but under the shadow of our glory, invigorated by God and given form in the cause, Savior of Russia. Nothing can stop us now. A new day. When Konstantin Rezhodovsky awoke, the first thing he felt was the familiar throbbing pain in his head. It was particularly bad this morning, and as usual, Rezhodovsky could not recall exactly how he had spent the previous night. With a sluggish pace, he opened his eyes and gave a half-hearted glance at the alarm clock on his nightstand. Rezhodovsky's sight was blurred, and he could not make out the time at first. After a moment, his eyes finally adjusted and revealed the hour, 2:30 in the afternoon. His head still aching, his body still sapped of energy, Rezhodovsky clumsily rolled out of his bed and landed on the floor with a loud thud. Basically just he's sick, blood, not good, coughing. West of Kamikia, in the east, standing all alone. Rezhodovsky's enemies were either dead or wishing they were. His dreaded armies had their boots firmly on the neck of the Russian Far East. That gave Rezhodovsky a great deal of comfort. Excitement to the future would be set at his mercy. All of Russia would be, along with the undesirables hiding therein. A great darkness arises in the east. Only regret. How many years has it been? Lev Okiton thought to himself as he walked down the main street of Chita. 50 years or so. That sounded about right. So much had changed since he left the city with his family in 1920. There were a number of apartments and unfamiliar buildings. Where once only houses stood, the roads were much better paved than he remembered too. But some buildings, mainly landmarks like a museum and church, remained the same. Okhotin tried to recognize any familiar faces in the throngs who walked among the streets. He turned his gaze to an old woman, that mark on her cheek that could only have been Mrs. Yakunskva, who ran the store down the street from his house and gave him and his friends candy for free. Okitan was going to say something when Yakunskva realized he was looking at her. Turning white with fear, she hid her face and scurried away. As Okitan tried to pick up individual people in the crowd, more and more of them did the same, covering their faces in fear, trying not to catch his attention. He tried to call it to a man with sandy blonde hair that Okitan recognized as his schoolmate, Dmitri. Damisha, how? Please, I didn't do anything, Dmitri cried out. Okitan, didn't know what to say as Dmitri fled. He felt like an idiot who said something wrong, some wrong word to the passerby. Was he not? He thought, as his heart sank with solitude, no longer the second most powerful man in the Far East, but just another man isolated in a crowded street. Ours is a high and lonely destiny. A woman's lot. Women of Russia, be not beguiled by the honeyed words promising liberation. The true woman, as conceived by God, no longer exists in the decadent West. She has been hanged with a rope of Judo-Bolshevik feminism. Her successor is the degenerate liberated woman, the whore of Babylon. This wicked harlot thinks nothing out unborn lives in her womb, and for what? That she might enrich herself with a career meant for her husband? Oh my goodness, bro. Oh, but how rarely does she need one of those. Faithful monogamy is not for her. She is happier when she has had an unending line of sinners with which to fornicate endlessly, devoid of any morality, love, or faith. She ends her life as a ruined, dishonored, and drug addict Jezebel. Such is how the Jews would have you as well. To embrace Western feminism is to cast off all that makes women pure and godly. In Russia, we understand that God has a place for all of us. For men, that place is on the front lines in the factories. For you, blessed wives, sisters, daughters, and mothers, that place is the safety of the home and church. You are empowered by the Lord to bear life anew. Only from your natural state can happiness spring, the joy of raising children, of welcoming your man home after a hard day's work, of finding comfort in the embrace of masculine sex, children, kitchen, church? Bro, what the fuck? This is goofy. And then now we're doing little kids in the fascist movement, okay. We have our list, we know their names, and we know where they live, where they work, and who they trust. It is time to root out the rot. His apartment's sole window. He saw what was unfolding down the street. A crowd of maybe 100 people were shuffling their way down the street. Some looked far worse than others. A few dragged large suitcases behind them, but most of them had nothing save the clothes on their backs. Grigori was puzzled for a moment. Then he saw their rifle-toting black shirts at their flanks, and the pieces fell into place. As the crowd moved on towards the walled ghetto that had been erected over the past several weeks, Gregory sighed and returned to his seat, putting the sorry sight behind him. The last thing he had seen, persecution in action. It had been in the name of the Tsar. Now it was in the name of some Fascist, an ideology dreamed up by a mad German. No matter how far Gregory fled, no matter how hard he tried, or how many Jews he offered shelter, it seemed that Russia would never change. He could do naught but weep. Sadness. Cooperation of the classes. And my brave Russians, all of you who have suffered under the communist, the Jew, the anarchy that they have caused, shall soon be released from your chains. As our movement sweeps westward, our party's numbers surge. As the true Russians seek to serve the Vost, the splitters couldn't stop us, the communists couldn't stop us, and the Jews won't stop us. The Russian people hunger for fascism, not as the Nazis delivered upon us, with fire, steel, and blood, but a fascism for the people, not against them, and I intend to bring them just that. A system of harmonious class collaboration where all Russians work together for the betterment of their nation and their race. Remember now and remember always, for my people, for God, nation, and labor. Today the Vost once again took to the balcony, the same one that he had used to announce the conquest of the splitters, and the Tsarists delivering a fiery, rousing speech to his people, both assembled below and across the radio waves. He promised the people the beginning of a new era of economic prosperity and the creation of what he calls class collaboration, closely modeled on the Nazi economic system that Adolf Hitler had created and nurtured decades before. Rodozansky had promised to expand mega corporations and promote the cooperation of the lower, middle, and upper classes, while some international observers have had markedly negative reactions to the Vost promises, comparing them to the beginnings of what would end up a bloated corpse of German economy. It seems that everyone within the all-Russian government of the Far East is more than happy to go along with the Vost plans, with those who were once willing to speak out, either having been purged long ago or simply too afraid to publicly say otherwise. Only time will tell. A letter to Congress, to the corrupt Zionist snakes of the United States Congress. By all that is holy on this earth, you would be hard-pressed to find a larger collection of corrupt kleptocrats, disgusting race traitors, and power-hungry Jews. Do you really think you're accomplishing anything in your so-called Capitol building, like fat pigs to a feeding trough? Perhaps it would be more forgiving if you weren't feeding on the hopes and dreams of thousands of suffering Americans, if only they knew how many of their problems caused by all-powerful elites who claim to represent them on one hand, while pillaging their wealth and destroying their racial identity on the other hand. The only thing I find worse than your blatant greed and suspicious Jewish ways is the decadent and broken systems your Congress represents. Democracy? What a joke. I'm going to take this opportunity to call it what it is, a farce. You allow your people to vote, but you and I both know that it is all just smoke and mirrors. The powerful Jews who subtly control the strings of your country are not the people, the ones who decide what fool to lead the next. The powerful Jews who subtly control and pull the strings of your country are the ones who decide the next fool to lead America to its inevitable ruin, not the people. It is clear that America is a nation of blind sheep led by Jewish wolves. America is destined to fail, and that is a fact. You allow women to hold powerful political offices, and yet you claim that America is the greatest nation on earth? Such is the way of the Jew. Once the Zionists gets their way, inferiors will attempt to run roughshod over everyone else. The day will soon come, and I am sure it won't be long, when American people realize how misled they really are, and take the matter of their own hands. Rot in hell. That'll show them. And we got our territory back. We just conceded some resources. Gave us more legitimacy. To the foreign minister of the mighty Greater German Reich, salutations. As the leader of the esteemed Russian Fascist Party, it is my great pleasure to bring wonderful news from the Far East. Our armies have triumphed over the decadent Judo-Bolshevik dogs who once sullied this land with their disgusting presence, bringing victory over the National Socialist cause, and undoubtedly redeeming Russia in the eyes of the world. With our presence here secured, I now extend my hand to you and your mighty nation in friendship and solidarity, as we both nations who closely follow the tenets of the late great Adolf Hitler. It would make a great deal of sense to reach common ground and it would make great sense to reach diplomatic ground and get on good terms. No, regrettably, our state still struggles to attain recognition amongst the nations of the world. No doubt this is the work of the powerful Jewish elites, who would like nothing more than to see our movement ground to the dust before it can truly challenge the reign of terror over the world. Germany, however, is different. Your mighty people have rejected the Jew and their insidious plans of global domination, and it is because of this that I reach out to the great nation for recognition. As the true heir to the Russia's legacy, a legacy untarnished by the darkness of Judo-Bolshevism, although it is indeed true that our two peoples have not seen eye to eye in the past, perhaps we could use this opportunity to begin a new chapter for the Russo-German relations, dutifully united as ideological brethren. I shall await your response. With great enthusiasm, yours. Now we wait for the response. Silence from the Reich. To the office of the Vazad. Often its furniture changed and moved around seemingly erratically by the order of Razadomsky himself, who often experimented with the best ways to lay out his desk, drinking chairs, and artwork. Presently, the desk sat in the middle of the room, closer to the back window, which looked out into Ravodonsk across the entire room. Tucked away in one of the corners was a trio drinking chairs and a small table in between them, while Ravodonsky sat behind the desk. His foreign ministers, Spasskovsky, sat in the chair facing the Vazad, quietly observing the temperamental dictator. How many days has it been? Ravodonsky asked. 7, sir. Spasskovsky replied, pausing before he spoke, the words only reluctantly leaving his mouth. 2 or 3 seconds of silence passed as Ravodonsky's temper grew and grew until it boiled over. He picked up a glass of vodka and threw it across the room, sailing at incredible speed until it impacted upon the wall over the aging Spasskovsky's head. The foreign minister winced as particles of glass and vodka sprinkled over his head. 7 fucking days, roared Zonsky. All of you. What we have done for nothing. How fucking dare they? Spasskovsky was used to this in the Vod's volatile temper. He knew how to weather the storm. Silence. His mouth into a curt scowl as he watched his master rage about. I will never forgive Hitler's fucking henchmen. Ravodonsky continued. They have forgotten their roots. Ravodonsky paused for a second, catching his breath, before continuing. And they will regret their ignorance of our cause. The tantrum would pass. The rage limited to his office and not himself. He reflected on the cause of the outburst, silent from Germany, following the outreach of friendship. Once home, he sighed and reminded himself that he needed to find someone else to bring bad news to Voz. The Germans have betrayed us. Fuck you guys, we're both Nazis, dude. Why would you not? In a war against the Russian Empire, the Nationalists will win. Another Congress of the Russian Fascist Party. The silence of the room was overwhelming. Party comrades shuffled their papers and coughed awkwardly as they waited for the Voz to speak. At last, Ravodonsky cleared his throat and scanned his cruel eyes across the room. My Soratoniki, Ravodonsky began, the Second Congress, as the Russian Fascist Party is now in session. Some of you may be wondering why I call such a meeting. After all, the party, not transcended to glorious new heights, has unity and strength not been brought to Central Siberia to heal? Sycophantic murmurs of agreement broke out throughout the room. A house may look grand, it may look powerful, it may look unyielding, but what happens if the foundations are weak? It collapses in on itself. The murmurs grew louder and the nodding more vigorous. Ravodonsky slammed his fist onto the table, and silence fell across the room. Do you think I'm a fucking idiot? Do you think you think me blind to the infighting between Bolotov and Sherikov? Alexander Bolotov and Gregory Sherikov glanced at each other with pale faces. Let me make one thing clear, Ravodonsky spat. I am the Vozd. I am the party. None of you are untouchable. None of you, if you threaten the stability of all we achieved, your carcasses will be tossed into the frozen pit. He pointed aggressively at the two men. History will view you as heroes, or it will not remember it at all. You decide your fate. A final ultimatum. The final purge. The party was omnipotent. The party was omniscient, yet the party was not pure. Despite all the Vaz had achieved, dissent still festered in the upper echelons of the Russian Fascist Party, like a disease that kept the host weak and infirm. Those who had long doubted Razotsky continued to scurry through the corridors of power, conspiring behind his back and plotting his removal from power. They wanted someone younger, someone safer, someone more pliable to their whims. The fact he had tolerated such men for so long spoke volumes to his former desperation. Now, however, it was time for change. Drip lisped with sadistic satisfaction. Bolotov had provided his useful own contributions, of course targeting those who were allegedly plotting against the state. From the lowliest black shirt to the highest council member, none were spared. Toss them into the pits. Native. The prodigal son. The number of arrests have decreased. The tireless efforts by men have led the general to decrease the subversive activity, and the agitators have made their presence hidden for fear of retribution. We are well armed from the industry. Central Siberia, preparations of war have begun. Ravodonsky, unimpressed. You're sure? What basis do you have for this? The number of arrests have decreased. Reports of anti-state thought are in the ranks, descending from a small number. They're already at a reign, becoming more secure every day. Basically, yeah, just he thinks the old days, Alexander, the enemy within, cannot hope to dislodge. Yeah, basically, we're the true heirs. The greatness of Azad, or Vazd. As he did every morning before school, Andrei turned the small television. Basically just saying little kids are now, yeah. It's so great nowadays. It's just with pride. The children are getting propagandized. How did we get here? Nearly 50 years of struggle, he had returned. He had thought that he would return in chains after betrayal by Japanese or Bolshevik sympathizers, or sold out by his own, like the traitor Bonavonsky, but instead he returned as Caesar at the head of the army of the true. He still fondly remembered the years in Harbin, waiting for an opportunity, sniffing out traitors and Jews to give them what they deserved, but age had dulled his desire for such indulgencies, and the wild ambience of Harbin had given way to the former Communist Party headquarters in Novosibirsk. The bitter cold, desolate Zaya comfort in his duties. The struggles of those days, years in exile, made him stronger in those who served with him. Bolotov, that violent, unpredictable sycophant, had also grown into an effective soldier for National Socialism through the years of hard living. Yet it was an exile that separated the ones who would remain true to National Socialism from the self-serving seekers, the peddlings of the world, the bastards who had set him back years, stolen his woman, and wasted thousands of Russian lives in a futile struggle against the inevitable rise of the one Vazad. The struggle would have continued for Russia to survive. The mewing of the cat interrupted his thoughts, and Vazad took it into his arms, stroking its soft fur as he thought of coming victories. A shadow cast. Russia was reunified. In the city of Novosibirsk, a crowd had gathered in the central area, once known as Lenin Square, now renamed Spassky Square after the late ideologue, and with the old Bolshevik statues torn down and shattered at the center of the square, atop a quickly built stage surrounded by armed black shirts glaring down at the gathered people. My fellow Russians, Spassky began, all but growling out the words. At long last, all of Russia stands united under the one state, one people, one Vazad. Vazd, be proud of yourself, for at least we can bring about national rebirth and crush all those who brought us low. Although some of those in the crowd hesitated, most cheered at this great accomplishment. After all, they reasoned no government could be worse than the chaos they had gone through. Could it? A wild grin on his face, Rovansky let them cheer for a minute before signaling them to be quiet. Now some of you might be wondering just who it was that brought the motherland to ruin. I'll tell you who it was. It was in part the fault of those damn judo Bolsheviks. There's no denying that. However, the ones most deserving of our blame, of our fury, are those corrupt fascist pretenders in Berlin, corrupted by Jewish whispers and wealth of Zion. We will crush them, all of them, and take back the motherland for the sake of the Russians and Russians alone. Today we rest. Tomorrow, however, we prepare to bring fire of hell upon every German who continues to obey orders of the Jew. Even a rare few slipped away. Out of fear or out of disgust, the masses began to cheer once more. Their final victory was in sight. They would deliver it to their Vazd, no matter the cost. The broken world waits in darkness. The renewed vigor of the Vazd is ready to face whatever threat is in front of him. And then he changes this little not whole yet. There's no extra content after that, so I was just leaving it there. There's no reason to waste time with just the same war I've done twice now. So thank you for watching. This is the official, I guess, first, when I realized I can actually do A to Z on this game.